Your wine is poisoned, not with arsenic, not with lead, not with anything that dramatic. It is poisoned with something far more insidious, something the industry adds deliberately, legally, and in quantities that would have horrified the most decadent Roman emperor. And the worst part, you think you are drinking something healthy. You have heard the studies. A glass of red wine is good for the heart, they told you. Antioxidants, polyphenols, the French paradox. So you pour yourself a glass every evening, believing you are doing your body a favour. You are not. That glass of modern wine is a chemical cocktail disguised as an ancient tradition. And the civilization that actually invented wine as medicine, they would not recognise a single drop in your bottle. In the year 77 AD, in a sown villa overlooking terraced vineyards on the slopes outside Rome, a naturalist named Pliny the Elder finished cataloguing something extraordinary. His work, Naturalis Historia, documented over 185 distinct varieties of wine produced across the Roman Empire. But Pliny was not writing a party guide. He was writing a medical text. Roman physicians prescribed specific wines for specific conditions. Opimian wine aged for decades was prescribed for digestive ailments. Mulsum, wine blended with raw honey, was given to patients recovering from illness because they understood it promoted gut health. Passum, made from sun-dried grapes, was concentrated with nutrients and used as a restorative tonic. These were not casual recommendations. They were standardized medical protocols deployed across an empire of 60 million people spanning 3 continents. Roman military doctors carried specific wines in their medical kits alongside surgical instruments. Wine was not a vice in Rome. It was infrastructure. It was pharmacy. It was engineered nutrition in liquid form. Now, pick up the bottle sitting on your counter, turn it around, read the label. You will find almost nothing there. Maybe contains sulfites. Maybe a government warning about pregnancy. That is it. No ingredient list, no nutritional information, no processing disclosure. Every packaged food in your kitchen is required by a law to tell you exactly what is inside it. Every can of soda, every bag of chips, every frozen dinner. But wine gets a pass, and that should make you furious, because what is inside that bottle is nothing like what the Romans were drinking. Modern commercial wine can legally contain up to 72 approved additives. 72. Mega purple, a concentrated grape dye used to make cheap wine look expensive. Dimethyl dicarbonate, a chemical sterilizer so toxic that workers handling it must wear hazmat suits, but somehow it is safe for you to drink. Velcorin, polyvinyl polypyrrolidone, ammonium phosphate. These are industrial chemicals, they're in your wine, and not one of them has to appear on the label. But here is where it gets worse. The grapes themselves are the first betrayal. Modern commercial vineyards operate on an industrial model that would be unrecognizable to a Roman viticulturist. Conventional vineyards in the United States use an average of 26 different pesticides per growing season. Glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, has been detected in 100% of California wines tested in a 2019 study by the organization Mums Across America. 100%. That is not contamination, that is saturation. A Roman vineyard operated on a fundamentally different philosophy. Roman agronomists like Columella, writing in the 1st century AD, described sophisticated polyculture systems where vines grew alongside olive trees, legumes, and cover crops. This was not primitive farming. This was engineered biodiversity. The legumes fixed nitrogen in the soil, eliminating the need for synthetic fertilizers that would not exist for another 1,800 years. The companion plants attracted predatory insects that controlled pests naturally. The system was self-sustaining, self-correcting, and produced grapes with nutrient density that modern monoculture vineyards cannot approach. Think of it like this. Imagine a fortress with 20 different defensive walls, each one reinforcing the others. That is a Roman vineyard. Now imagine tearing down 19 of those walls and replacing them with a single electric fence that you have to keep repairing. That is modern viticulture. Now here is the genius of what the Romans actually did with those grapes once they harvested them. Roman winemaking was a fermentation process that we are only now beginning to understand the full brilliance of. When Romans crushed grapes, they used stone or wooden presses, often treading them by foot first, a method that sounds primitive until you understand the science. Foot treading crushes grape skins gently and unevenly, releasing juice while leaving seeds largely intact. Seeds contain harsh, bitter tannins. Modern mechanical crushers crack seeds open, flooding the juice with astringent compounds that then have to be removed through chemical fining agents. The Roman method avoided the problem entirely. No problem, no chemical fix needed. That is engineering. They fermented in terracotta amphoras called dolia, massive vessels that could hold up to 1,100 litres buried partially in the ground. This was not aesthetic, it was thermal engineering. The earth surrounding the buried amphora maintained a constant temperature between 14 and 18 degrees Celsius, creating ideal conditions for slow, steady fermentation. Think of it like a natural refrigerator with perfect climate control, no electricity required. Modern science has confirmed that slow fermentation at stable temperatures produces dramatically higher concentrations of beneficial polyphenols, anthocyanins, and resveratrol. These are the compounds that actually give wine its health benefits, the ones your doctor was talking about. Fast fermentation at higher temperatures, which is standard in modern industrial winemaking, degrades these compounds by up to 40% before the wine even reaches a bottle. The terracotta itself was the second stroke of genius. It was porous. It allowed micro-oxygenation, a process where tiny amounts of oxygen pass through the clay walls and interact with the wine over months and years, developing complexity and stabilizing beneficial compounds. Imagine a wall that breathes, letting in just enough air to strengthen what is inside without letting in enough to destroy it. That is what terracotta does. Stainless steel, the modern standard, is completely non-porous. It seals the wine in a dead environment. Any oxygenation has to be done artificially, mechanically, and it never replicates the slow, even exchange that clay provides. Here is the critical part. The Romans did not add sulfites to prevent spoilage. They did not need to. The combination of high polyphenol grapes grown in living soil, slow terracotta, fermentation with wild yeast populations, and natural preservation techniques like adding small quantities of tree resin or filtered seawater created wine that was inherently stable. The polyphenols themselves acted as natural preservatives, antioxidants that protected the wine from the same oxidation that damages your cells. Think of it like a living immune system protecting itself. The wine did not need chemicals because it was biologically complete. Modern winemakers bypass all of this. They ferment in stainless steel tanks at controlled high speeds, sometimes finishing in 72 hours what took Romans 3 months. They add commercial yeast strains engineered for speed and predictability instead of relying on the wild yeasts that Roman fermentation depended on, yeasts that contributed their own beneficial enzymes and metabolites to the finished product. And then they dump in sulfur dioxide, potassium sorbate, and a battery of other chemicals to stabilize a product that is fundamentally unstable because they stripped out every natural compound that would have protected it in the first place. They broke the wine, then they added chemicals to disguise the damage, and they charge you $60 for the privilege. The evidence is not the theoretical. In 2013, a team of archaeologists and chemists from the University of Catania analysed residue from Roman amphoras recovered from a shipwreck off the coast of Sicily, dating to the 2nd century BC. The chemical analysis revealed polyphenol concentrations 3 to 5 times higher than those found in modern commercial wines. The resveratrol content alone, the compound most associated with cardiovascular benefits, was present at levels that would require you to drink an entire case of modern wine to match what a single Roman cup provided. A study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science in 2017 confirmed similar findings from amphora residues excavated at Pompeii. The Roman wine, preserved under volcanic ash for nearly 2,000 years, still contained measurable levels of beneficial compounds that exceed what you will find in a bottle from your local store. These are not estimates. These are laboratory measurements from actual Roman wine residue. The wine they were drinking 2,000 years ago was objectively, measurably more beneficial than what you are drinking tonight. And those amphoras, many of them survive intact to this day, 2,000 years later. Your modern wine bottle will be in a landfill by next Tuesday. If this information is making you rethink what is in your glass, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe, because this is the kind of knowledge that has been buried, and every time you share it, it reaches someone who deserves to know the truth. So what happened? How did we go from wine as medicine to wine as a chemical delivery system? The answer is the same answer it always is: money. Industrialization of winemaking began in earnest in the mid-20th century, driven by the same forces that industrialized bread, dairy, and agriculture. The calculus was simple. Wild yeast fermentation is unpredictable and slow. It takes months, sometimes years. Commercial yeast fermentation takes days. Terracotta amphoras are expensive, fragile, and cannot be stacked in a warehouse. Stainless steel tanks are cheap, durable, and can produce 10,000 gallons at once. Polyculture vineyards require knowledge, labour, and patience. Monoculture vineyards can be managed with machines and chemicals. Every single change made to the winemaking process over the past 70 years was made to increase speed, reduce cost, and maximise volume. Not one of those changes was made to improve what ends up in your body. The additives exist because industrial wine is so nutritionally hollow and chemically unstable that it needs to be artificially propped up. Mega Purple exists because grapes grown on depleted, pesticide-saturated soil produce pale, thin juice that does not look like wine. Sulfites are added at levels 5 to 10 times what occurs naturally, because speed-fermented wine lacks the polyphenol matrix that made Roman wine self-preserving. Every additive is a patch on a broken system, and the industry fought for decades to ensure they never have to tell you what those patches are. In the United States, the alcohol industry successfully lobbied to be exempt from the FDA labeling requirements that apply to every other consumable product. That exemption has been in place since 1935, 90 years. For 90 years, the wine industry has operated under rules that allow them to put 72 chemicals in your glass and tell you nothing about it. That is not an oversight. That is a strategy. But here is what should really make your blood boil. The science on what these additives do to your body is damning. Sulfites at the concentrations found in modern wine are linked to headaches, respiratory inflammation, and disruption of gut bacteria. A 2020 study published in the journal Nutrients found that high sulfite wines reduced beneficial gut bacterial populations by up to 26% in controlled trials. Your gut microbiome, the thing that controls your immune function, your mood, your digestion, your weight, is being actively damaged by every glass. Remember the Roman mulsum, the wine blended with raw honey? Raw honey is one of the most potent prebiotics found in nature. It feeds lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, the exact strains that modern medicine now sells you in expensive probiotic capsules. The Romans were building up the exact system that modern wine tears down. They were feeding your gut with every glass. Modern wine is poisoning it. And here is what nobody in the industry will tell you. Those wild yeasts that drove Roman fermentation, yeasts from the grape skins, from the vineyard soil, from the ambient air of the Mediterranean, they produced their own probiotic benefits. Wild fermented wine was a living probiotic beverage. Modern wine fermented with a single laboratory yeast strain and then sterilized with sulfites is biologically dead and it contributes nothing to your gut. It only takes away. And those headaches you get after 2 glasses? You have been told it is the alcohol. You've been told you are sensitive. You've been told to drink more water. It is not you. It is not the alcohol. It is 72 unnamed chemicals in a product that is legally allowed to hide behind a label that says nothing. The problem was never your body. The problem is what they did to the wine. You are not powerless. The Romans figured this out 2,000 years ago without mass spectrometers, without clinical trials, without any of the tools we have today. They figured it out through centuries of observation, experimentation, and a culture that treated winemaking as engineering, not as factory production. You can reclaim that knowledge starting today. Here is what to do. First, the simplest step. Look for wines labelled no added sulfites or certified organic. Under USDA organic certification, wines cannot contain added sulfites and must be made from organically grown grapes. This single change eliminates the majority of chemical additives in one move. Second, seek out natural wine. not naturally made or sustainably produced, which are marketing terms with no legal definition and no regulatory enforcement. Look for wines from producers who practice whole cluster fermentation with wild yeast, minimal intervention, and no fining or filtering. These wines are the closest modern equivalent to what came out of a Roman amphora. They taste different from what you are used to. They taste alive, funky, complex, sometimes unpredictable, because living things are unpredictable. That unpredictability is the signature of authenticity. Some producers are even reviving amphora fermentation, using clay vessels modelled directly on Roman dolia, buried in the earth exactly as they were 2,000 years ago. The results have stunned even skeptics in the wine industry. Third, if you want to go furthest, look for wines fermented in kvevari or amphora from producers in Georgia, the country with the oldest continuous winemaking tradition on Earth, stretching back 8,000 years. Georgian kvevari wines are fermented and aged in buried clay vessels using methods that predate Rome and that Roman winemakers themselves adopted. The wine is amber, rich, tannic, and loaded with the polyphenol concentrations that modern commercial wine has engineered out of existence. This is what wine was supposed to be. 2,000 years ago, a Roman physician could prescribe a specific wine to heal a specific condition, and it worked, because the wine was a whole, living, nutritionally dense product engineered by a civilization that understood fermentation at a level we abandoned for profit. Tonight, you will pour something from a bottle that contains chemicals no one is required to tell you about, made from grapes saturated with pesticides no one is required to disclose, processed with methods designed to maximize shareholder returns, not your health. The Romans built roads that still carry traffic, they built aqueducts that still carry water, and they made wine that still contained measurable nutrients after 2,000 years under volcanic ash. The modern wine industry cannot make a product that survives a week without chemical intervention. That is not progress. That is a scam dressed in a beautiful label. But now you know, and knowing means you get to choose differently. Not because someone told you to, because a civilization that built things to last already proved there was a better way.